Okay, we're on chapter 6 of our Megillah. Megillah's out. Let's go. We've got a lot to do today. I want to get through a few chapters today. That's my goal. So let's move fast. Pens out. Get ready to take your notes. This will all be on the midterm. Chapter 6. V'laylahu nadadash nasa melech. So now the king cannot sleep. The word nadada literally means shaken up. Shaken up. The king was shaken up and he couldn't sleep. He was, chapter 6, he was an insomniac this night. Not any other night, which itself disturbed him. The other way of reading this, by the way, is the Melech is God. That means God, as it were, his sleep was shaken. What does that mean? God doesn't sleep, right? Or slumber. So what does that mean? That means that the heavens, as it were, from all the praying and the teshuvah the Jewish people had done at that time, or the repentance they had made, the heavens were broken up, and there was an awakening.
Did it say the connection between Mordecai and Haman?
I'm going to come back to that. I will come back to that. Not today, though. Yes, but remind me. Yeah.
The king isn't sleeping, that's what you just said?
The kings couldn't sleep, right? He was, or he slept a little bit, and then he was shaken, and he couldn't go back to sleep. Different opinions. But the other way, as I understand, is Hashem was shaken up. The heavens were shaken up, right? And Hashem, as it were, awoke from his slumber, as it were, to save the Jewish people. So the redemption is about to begin. He said to his servants, his satraps, to bring him the book of remembrances. Now remember that book? That was the book where the favors that the king wants to make and has to bestow upon people is written down. And we know what's written in there, don't we? Right, the fact he had to had to repay Mordecai for saving his life when it comes to Bigsan and Teresh. Okay, so he brings out Zifrei Yamim, and it was read before the king. There was a custom, says the Vilna Gaon, that kings would have, this is Rashi actually, to have parables and speeches read to them. Right, that was done. So that's what he did. He couldn't sleep. Right? He was nervous, the fact that he couldn't sleep, it meant something to him. And so in verse 2 it says, in verse 1 rather, he called for this book to be read out. What is it written in there? Hey, you owe a favor to Bigsan and to Teresh, right? For they wanted to destroy you, and Mordecai saved you. So now you've got to pay back Mordecai for what those two guys wanted to do for you, okay? Because they wanted to kill you. So, Vayomer HaMelech, Ma naseh yakar gedula leMordechai. What can I do exactly to pay back Mordechai for what he did for me? Right? The first he said was, has anything been done for him? Okay, what has actually been done for him? Ma naseh yakar gedula leMordechai alzeh. What has actually been done for him? So what can I bestow for him? What's been done for him? So they responded, for him means for Mordechai. You know, they say that, the Talmud says that they didn't do this because they loved Mordechai, but even the people in the palace hated Haman. He was a sadistic individual. So even Haman was hated so much that they wanted to repay and give Mordechai his due. According to one opinion, by the way, actually a few opinions, the sleep was disturbed because he had a dream. And in his dream, he saw Haman hanging over him with a sword. That's what woke him up. Now remember, that was happening because he already was becoming suspicious of Haman. Remember that? Because already, Esther had started to implant inside his mind that there was something going on between Haman and her and Esther. Okay, so already there was something going on.
He had an image like Haman as well.
The Haman was holding over him. That was a dream he had. That's what the Gemara says. But even on the surface, even just reading the basic thing, he says, I want to repay him for what he did. Okay?
But Haman was
And they took
Haman was ruling over him?
yes, or with a sword. So he felt threatened. Okay? Okay. But he wanted to repay back Mordechai. Now, it says, Vayoma melech ma naseh yakar gedula. What can I do to honor and make him great? Remember that. It's going to come in handy a little bit later. Okay, in a few moments. It says in verse 3, Vayom HaMelech, Ma na'aseh yakar u'gedula leMordechai. What can I do to give dignity and greatness to Mordechai? That's what he wants to do now, to repay him. Suddenly he hears someone in the courtyard. Now remember, it's the middle of the night. Vayom HaMelech, mi b'chatzer, v'Haman ba lachatzer. Now is Haman come. Now Zeresh gave advice. Haman's wife Zeresh gave advice to Haman, go in the morning. But he was so anxious to destroy Mordechai and destroy the Jewish people that he goes in the middle of the night.
Go in the morning to do what?
To go and tell Achashverosh that he wants to wipe out the Jewish people. The time had come to make this happen. Yeah? To hang Mordechai on the 8th, on the tree. What happens right afterwards? So now Achashverosh, who already was suspicious, now it's even more. Why exactly is this guy coming in the middle of the night? You come in the morning to see me, not in the middle of the night. Right? I could have been asleep. Really, it was this anxiousness to get his plan to kill Mordechai happening. And his wife said, go in the morning. He didn't listen, went in the night. What did Achashverosh see this as? He was coming to kill him. Right? Come, it's time to hang Mordechai, which I prepared for him. So, the rabbis learn out from this. Inside his words is prophetic vision. Lo is actually him, Haman, because we're going to see that Haman is going to end up being hung on the same gallows he prepared for Mordechai. This is another example of many of Midah Keneged Midah, measure for measure. Haman wanted Mordechai to hang on the 8th tree, and now Haman ends up being hung there himself. Asher Hechin Lo, that was made for him. Okay? Here's Haman. Here he comes. Verse 6. Let's go. Tell me, what can I do to bring honor to a person? That's the first thing Achashverosh tells Haman. Haman thinks he's talking about him. Why does he think that? Because he's already been on great ascendancy. He's been going up and up and up and up. Who else could he be talking about? Right? However, he misses out Ugedula. Remember he said, what can I do to give Yakar Ugedula, honor and greatness? Oh, here he says, what can I do to give honor? Haman should have realized, right? Or Haman thought he was speaking about him because he already had all the Gedula. So who else could he be talking about? I've got all the Gedula, all the power already. It must be me he wants to honor. It must be me that he's talking about. That's why he made the mistake. He heard the Yakar, he said he would have said Gedula. He didn't say that. But Yomer Haman Belibo, and then Haman said in his heart. They learn out from this few words that Haman was speaking from his heart that the Megillah was written with Ruach HaKodesh. Because how else could the author of the Megillah have known this is what Haman was thinking? They couldn't have known that. I mean, the events that happened, they could have known, but they couldn't have known that what he was thinking in his own heart. They learn out from this that the Megillah was written with Ruach HaKodesh, with a certain level of prophecy of divine spirit, that even Haman's thoughts were able to be recorded in the Megillah. Okay, this isn't just an ordinary storybook. This is written by prophets, prophetess, and there's greatness inside it. So he thinks to himself, who else exactly could Achashverosh want to be honoring? I.e., it must be me. And Haman gives advice. Vayaviu lavush malchus, bring great clothing. There's the clothing again, ladies. Clothing is mentioned one more time. Bring beautiful clothing of royalty. Asher lavash ba melech, of royal royalty. V'sus, and a horse that the king rides upon. Nitan keter malcha barosho, and a crown should be put on his head. Now that was a really stupid thing for Haman to say. Because Achashverosh realized that Haman thought he was talking about himself. You got that? So how could you read that verse? Haman is saying, right, give me the crown. Oh my goodness, that's like treason. It's getting really bad. It's not fully there yet, but it's getting really bad. Another opinion is he wasn't that stupid. The crown he was talking about was a crown not for his head, but for...
Someone you on.
Nope, not Mordechai. Read the verse. If you look at the verse, look at verse 8, and actually follows through.
His son.
Nope,
Esther.
nope.
Is it-
Have you ever seen a royal parade
His
before?
wife.
Nope. Not his wife, not his son, not Esther, not Mordechai, but the horse. You ever seen they put crowns on horses on a royal parade? They give special things. That would have been a sign that this person going. That's what Haman actually meant. Achashverosh misunderstood it as a crown on his own head because he thought it was thinking about himself, and that would have been and was catastrophic for him. And by the way, later on, I think Haman figured that out and doesn't mention this idea of the crown again. You got it? So Malcha Barosho, because about the horse. He should make a horse that he rides upon, a melech, and he'll put a crown on it. Or him. It's hard to know. V'nasan vush hasus al yad ish mishar melech. We'll get him all dressed up. The king's most noble officers. Let them entire him. Let him give honor. Parade him on horseback. This is what should be done. The crown is now removed from that sentence. He's not making that mistake again. What does the king say? Yom melech lahaman maher, quickly. By the way, all the events happen very quickly over here. Maher, this is verse 10. Kachet alavush, take the clothing, vetasus and the horse, kashedibarta va'asechen leMordechai. The downfall, ladies, has begun.
Wait, what's the king saying?
King says, what exactly you wanted to do, dress up the horse and dress up the person you want to honor, dress him up, but let it be done to Mordechai. So Haman is like, what? He doesn't realize that he owes a favor over here. HaYehudi. Now look at this. He says, give it to Mordechai. He says, which Mordechai? Right? This is like inside the verse. HaYehudi, the Jew. He says, well, there's many Mordechais who are Jews. He says, HaYeshev b'shar melech, the one sitting at the gate of the king. So Haman is trying to finagle and try to get out of giving this honor to Mordechai. And he says, Al tapeh mikol asher dibarta, don't miss out a single detail. The king has spoken, and Haman has to do exactly as he says. And Haman takes the clothing and the horse, and he dresses up Mordechai. There he is, being dressed up. And he puts him right down the main road of the city for everyone to see. The Gemara says very famously that Haman's daughter saw this parade from a distance, right, up in a building, when they passed by the house, right? And she thought it was Haman who was on the horse, her father, and it was Mordechai doing the leading, because he was leading him through. She then threw her refuse pot, her chamber pot, onto her father, thinking it was Mordechai. When she saw what she had done to her father, she was so apoplectic, she was so upset, she actually threw herself out the window and killed herself. She committed suicide in this. Okay. That's going to be important as well for the story.
This Haman's wife.
This is Haman's daughter.
Oh, right.
His wife's still alive, we're going to see in a second. This is what happens to people who God, or the king, wants to honor. What does Mordechai do right afterwards? Right afterwards, verse 12, the Yashev Mordechai al Shar Melech. He goes right back, after this whole parade, he goes right back to where he was before, dressed up in his sackcloth and ashes. He gets out of his royal clothing and goes right back to repentance and teshuvah right afterwards. This event did not affect him. He was still the same Mordechai before as he was after, and after he was before. Look at and what happens? Haman nidchav al beiso avel v'chayav fafui rosh. Now Haman is now an avel. What does avel mean? He's mourning. Who's he mourning for? His daughter, according to that Peshat. Right? I would say that he was just very, very despondent. He was like he was in a state of mourning over what was happening to Mordechai. Now, his wife and advisors get it. Verse 13, chapter 6. Vaysaper Haman lezeresh ishto. He talks to his wife, ulechol avanu, his loved ones, et kol asher karahu. Everything that happened. What does word kara mean? We spoke about that as an important word when it comes to Amalek. Asher karcha b'derech. They happened upon us. How does he see all these events that have happened? Coincidence. Bad luck. Karahu. It's all bad luck. There's no divine power steering the events. It's all Karahu. On verse 13, chapter 6. Get it? It's all because, Makara, it just happened. It happens to be. I got unlucky. He's not taking the lesson over here. Vayamru lo chachamav, his wise people. Who are these wise people? You know they are? It's his friends who gave him wise advice. And people who give him wise advice are called wise. That's what the Gemara says. Because they're about to give him wise advice. What are they going to say? Okay, forget about it. What?
What word means wise?
Chachamav. Chacham is a wise person. Verse 13, halfway in. Vayomru lo chachamav. So he goes to his wife for advice. She now doesn't say anything because she realized she's onto a bad thing because her advice really failed. So now the wise people, being the people, his friends who gave him the wise advice, they're not called. Then Zeres Ishto, Im Zer Yodim, Mordechai, and they say, don't do anything. It's not going to work. This guy is of Jewish descent. You're not going to prevail against him. You're going to fall before him. When the Jews go down, they go very, very down, like the sand, the Torah says. But when they go up, they go very, very up and quickly, like the Kochavim, like the stars. That's the comparison given in the Torah, sand of the stars. So they're like, listen, you're treating them like the sand. But now we're seeing that in the stars, they're ascending, these people, and they're going up. It's not going to work. Does he listen? We're not sure whether he's about to heed their advice. Look at verse 14. As soon as they give this advice, bang! It quickly turns. Odam medabrim. While they're telling him, don't do it, you're going to die, it's going to end bad for you. What happens? You're going to fall. Odam medabrim. Imo v'sarisi melech higiu. The king's messengers come. What do they come to do? Why are they there? Invite them to the second party. Exactly, well done. So now the second party is being prepared. Remember that? The second party is when all the action is going to happen. Put on your seatbelts. Here we go. Which Esther made. Chapter 7. Let's go. Now the king and Haman come to drink with Esther. But the first feast, she was still fasting, she didn't drink or eat. Over here, however, even she partook of the food, but it tells us that they were drinking. Why are they drinking? Well, Haman's drinking because he's depressed. And Achashverosh is drinking because he's upset as well. He thinks this guy is going to overtake his kingdom. He now completely doesn't trust him. Not enough to kill him yet. Not enough to kill him yet, but it's coming. Always coming big time. He says, whatever you want, I'll give you your desire, even half the kingdom. The same offer still stands. That was verse 2. Now verse 3, follow inside. And if it's all good with you, tinasen li nafshi, save me. She says this, save me. V'tinasen li nafshi, save me. What should she have said? Save my people. Why does she say with save me? Right. Have mercy upon me. She realized if he loves her, which he does at this point still, he'll have mercy upon her, and then the second request will be easier. Requesting other people save me took a lot more work. You following? Write that down. Tinasel ni nafshi b'shila si. That's the she'ela. That's the person. Remember she'ela, right? Was the personal request, she'ela si. Va'ami b'vkasha si. And my nation, that's the bakasha. So she starts by saying, save me. That's the she'ela si. But at the end of the verse, she says, but don't forget my bakasha. Bakasha is for a request for other people. Save me, but save my people. Whoa, there it is. She tells him finally, I'm Jewish. Right? Why? Ki, nimkarni ani va'ami, because my people have been sold, and my people are about to be destroyed, lahashmid, laharov, ulabet, and to be annihilated. Genesis is something very, very interesting. Look at the end of verse 4. The ilu la'avadim, you see, had we been sold as slaves only, the lishvachot and maidservants, nimkaranu, hecharashti, I wouldn't have said anything. What's that? Had we been just sold as slaves, that would have been okay. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to totally wipe us out. She doesn't say who yet. Why does she say that? Well, one opinion is because Jews, it's regular for them to be exiled and sold as slaves. That already happened, right? And we could still be of benefit to you. Economically, it would make sense for us to remain your slaves, Achashverosh. The person who's making this happen doesn't want to make you benefit. This is about a petty argument he has with Mordechai. Therefore, he wants to kill us out, which is going to be a loss to you as well. When Jews are killed and removed from the country, what happens? The economy goes. Even Ferdinand Isabella, Machshimam in Spain in the 1400s, wanted to keep Don Isaac of Barbanel as their accountant. Kick out the Jews, but let's keep the accountant. She's like, the person doing this doesn't care about you. He wants these Jews killed. He wants them all dead. It's economically unviable to do that. So how do you remain slaves? It would have been good for you. So you're not benefiting from this slaughter. Ki ein hatzar shove b'nezek hamelech. Because the adversary is not even worthy of the king's damage, meaning the Jewish people. You get that point? Does that make sense? You sure? Verse 5. V'yom hamelech Achashverosh v'yom ela Esther Malka mi hu zeh v'yeh zeh hu. Who is this person and where is he? Hashem lo libo la'asot ken. Who wants to do this? V'tomar Esther ish tsar v'oyev. This is a really bad person. Haman harasha hazeh. Zeh means pointing. Let me see the word zeh. Someone's pointing. She points at Haman. Whoa. The final nail in his coffin is about to go in. Not fully there yet. Look what happens. The Haman nivat. Haman is totally trembling in his boots. Milifnei hamelech v'hamalka, in front of both of them. He absolutely trembles at this threat that now has come to him. Okay. Nivat. Haman nivat milifnei hamelech v'hamalka. Okay, now Achashverosh thinks it's all coming together. It's all making sense. He's invited the first party, invited the second party. I'm having dreams. He turns up in the middle of the night. He wants to honor himself. He wants the crown for himself. It's all coming to a peak. He is absolutely furious. What does he do? He leaves to cool down. He's not even there at this point to kill Haman. He needs one more thing to happen, which is going to happen, ladies. V'melech kam b'chamaso. He gets up, absolute anger. What does Haman do right away? He pleads with Esther, Hamalka, because he saw the king's evil determination against him was final. He's like, I'm dead, please intercede on my behalf. Watch what happens, verse 8. V'hamelech shav, the king returns, Migilat habitan, from his little walk, El Beit Mishta Yayin, V'Haman nofel al hamita. He falls on the bed. What bed? They're not in a bedroom. They're having a meal. So how do they used to eat? They used to eat on couches. They would lie down on couches and lean down and eat the food. And everyone had their own couch. Haman wants to plead with Esther. In so doing, he falls down. The Gemara says an angel comes and pushes him. He falls down and lands on her bed, on her eating. He walks in.
Who pushes him?
He falls down, or an angel pushes Haman onto the bed of Esther. That's what it says. The nofal alamita asher Esther aleh, that Esther is on. Uh-oh. So what does the king see when he returns from a little stroll around the garden? He's like, so Haman now is lying with Esther. you're trying to kill her as well? One opinion, or you're trying to be intimate with her?
Where are you, 8?
We're on verse 8 at the end of the verse. And they covered Haman's face. It used to be, even not that long ago, when they were about to execute someone, they would cover their head with a bag or cover their face. Another opinion is that Ahasuerus was so angry that looking at Haman's face drove him absolutely bonkers, and therefore they covered it over just to calm him down a little bit, or they would have been dead. Vayomer Charvona. Now, Charvon is an interesting character. We don't know who he is, but he's pretty disgusting. Charvona was the one who was involved in the plot to kill Mordechai. He's an opportunist, however. He's an opportunist because as soon as he sees that Haman is down and Mordechai is up, he switches sides and he jumps forward and sides with Mordechai and takes and starts speaking about Haman. So Havara Chalmeh Sarisim Lefnei HaMelech Gam Hine Ha'etza Shasa Haman LaMordechai Sheri Ber Tov Al HaMelech. You know what he says? He already has a tree 50 cubits high to kill Mordechai. Let's use that same one to kill him. And that's what they do. Vayitlu, last verse, chapter 7, verse 10. Vayitlu es Haman ala eitz. They hung Haman on the tree. Asher hechel Mordechai wanted to kill Mordechai on. Mida keneged mida. V'chamat hamelech shachacha. His anger abated, calmed down. Now the word shachacha, the last word in chapter 7, has 2 chafs. It didn't have to have. One would have done it. Shacha, right? What's shachacha? There were 2 angers. So there are 2 opinions to these 2 angers that had calmed down. One opinion was that the 2 angers were Hashem's anger and Achashverosh's anger. Hashem's anger from their eating of the feast now had calmed down. The repentance had worked, and Hashem was not going to destroy them. And Achashverosh's anger, in return, had calmed down as well. That was one. Another is that these 2 angers of that were calmed down, to abated, were actually the anger of Achashverosh, because he was angry at Haman on account of Esther, i.e. his plot against Esther, and on Vashti for what he did by having Vashti killed. He took away Vashti, now trying to take away Esther from me. So those 2 angers had finally subsided.
Did he kill him?
So he took him away, and he was killed, hung on the tree.
It was Haman's idea to kill Vashti.
Yes, Haman, remember, was Mamuchan. Haman was one who turned around to Achashverosh and said, listen, they're all going to rebel against you, go kill him. Yes.
When you talk about a person being like, is it hanged? Not
Hanged, okay. Hanged. Hanged is the correct English. So now Mordechai ends up taking all of the estate of Haman, and it goes to Mordechai. Mordechai comes for the king because she said, this is the person that saved us. She now reveals the whole relationship. He takes off the ring. Sound familiar? Asher hevir meHaman, that he took off Haman, v'yitna leMordechai, and he gave it to Mordechai. So basically, the ring wasn't on his finger; it was on Haman's finger. He took it off Haman's finger and gives it to Mordechai. In other words, you now the new prime minister. Okay? Is that the end of the story? Haman's dead, but something's still alive. What is alive still?
Oh, the decree.
The decree. Remember, the decree being sent out that on 30th of Adar, all the people where the Jews lived were allowed to go and kill him, all the Jews. So now, Esther has to request that this decree becomes rescinded. That's not easy. Rescinding a royal decree with a seal on it is very, very difficult. Because, hey, you can't just take back decrees. Then all other decrees are cheapened because of this. So look at verse 3. She has a plan. V'tosef Esther. Esther has more to ask. V'tabel lefnei melech. V'tipol lefnei raglav. She falls down. V'tefkin. She cries. V'schanen lo laviris ras Haman hagagi v'es machshvato. against the Jews. She says, please take away this decree against the Jews. He lets out his scepter, remember? She gets up before him. If it's good by you, verse 5 in chapter 8, if everything is good, and you love me still, Yikatev lehashiv. Lashiv means to rescind. Okay? To rescind this original decree. Or it means to nullify it. That you can't nullify a decree of the king. So he says, Lashiv hasfarim machshav Haman. This plan of Haman. It's not your decree you're taking back, it's Haman's decree. And therefore, do not worry. It won't have any effect upon you. Ahasuerus does not like this idea. He doesn't like it. And he says, verse 6. Oh, she starts. It's still her speaking. How can I see all this terrible stuff? See all the destruction of my family? So verse 7. He now speaks to both of them because they're both together now. Hine based Haman aside Esther. I gave Haman's house to Esther. And I gave it to Mordechai. And you got to hang him. Why is that a response? Why is that a response? He's like, no, that's enough. But that's good enough to make a point to everyone that this decree against Haman is not a good decree. They all know Haman. Everyone's heard what's happened. This was a massive story in Persia and the world. And therefore, this does not need to happen. I'm not going to rescind this decree. Everyone knows Haman's decree is nothing, so don't worry about it. They were still nervous. So they respond with a very clever idea. They respond with a very clever idea. And the idea was that Mordechai and Esther were allowed to make another decree. They're not rescinding the first one, but they're going to make another decree. Yeah? Now this is actually interesting. Verses 1 to 8 of chapter 8 happened on the 13th of Nisan, right? As it was happening. 9 to 14, they're about to begin, is actually going to take place on the 23rd of Sivan, later on, to tell us what actually happened. Right?
Wait, 1 to 8 on what date?
On the 23rd of Sivan. And then verse 15 returns to the original story.
What was the original date?
The original, what's happening is like this. Verses 1 to 8 is as it's happening, right? It's live. Esther and Mordechai are talking to Ahasuerus, okay? Then, verses 9 through 14 are actually jumping to the 23rd of Sivan, as you're going to see in a moment, to actually what happened. And verse 15, we go back to the original story of where Mordechai and Esther are in front of Ahasuerus. Watch carefully. This is quite interesting.
What was the original date then?
I'm sorry, what?
What was the original date?
The original date was the 13th of Nisan. Remember, this whole redemption had to happen in Nisan because that was the time of redemption that Mordechai chose. In order, 13th of the month of Nisan. Then, we're about to do verses 9 to 14. 9 to 14 occur later on. They tell us what actually happened, right? Which occurred on the 23rd day of the month of Sivan, a couple of months later. Then in verse 15, we go back to the story. It's not so difficult. Follow inside, you'll see. So verse 8, the king says, you can make any decree that you want. Jump to the 23rd, which is verse 9. So now we've jumped forward to actually what happened. V'yikru sifrei HaMelech b'Beis Hahi b'chodesh hashlishi u'chodesh Sivan b'shlosha esrim bo, on the 23rd of Sivan, v'kasev k'chol asher tziva Mordechai, they wrote down the following. Then in all 127 provinces from Hodu to Cush, and he wrote it in every single language, and to every Jew in their own language, in the name of the king, and he sealed it with a ring that he now had. He sent letters by couriers on horseback, riders, to the effect, verse 11, here's the actual decree they ended up writing, to the effect that the king had permitted the Jews of every single city to organize and defend themselves, to destroy, slay, exterminate every armed force, exterminate or any people or province that threaten them, along with their children and women, and to plunder their possessions. So the Megillah jumps forward, talks about the new decree, which was that the Jewish people are allowed to defend themselves, and they're not going into trouble for doing it. And if you try to kill them, they're going to fight back. And if they fight back and win, they're allowed to take possessions of the people. This is going to stop many people from trying to kill the Jews, but not everyone, and they're still going to try to attack. Okay? So can you see we've now jumped to the 23rd of Sivan, and that's when this decree was written and was sent out using extremely hard and fast animals to make it happen. So what's that? Look at verse 12. Follow carefully. On a single day, in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely the 13th day of the 12th month, that's Adar, this is what's written inside. The contents of the documents were to be sent out and published to all people. The couriers and riders of swift mules went forth in urgent haste by order of the king, and the edict was distributed in Shushan, the capital. Okay? So those few verses of the contents of this decree were all sent out, 23rd of Sivan. Now let's go back. Now we go back to the original story, and Mordechai and Esther are standing in front of Ahasuerus.
So in the beginning, they were supposed to be killed the 13th of Nisan.
They were always going to be killed on 13th of Adar. The conversation is happening the 13th of Nisan, and the decree, the new edict, not a reversal of the first, but in addition to the first one, the Jews could defend themselves, was the 23rd of Sivan. That's what we did. We just jumped forward to show the decree. Now we're jumping back, and we are on verse.
So the Jews were able to defend
Yes,
themselves
able them exactly.
Adar,
Right, on the 13th of Adar. That's correct, exactly. So they ran, and now we're back. And now Mordechai went out before the king. He's now a prime minister. He's no longer sackcloth and ashes. Now he puts on the royal clothing, and he does it for good. And Shushan was extremely joyous at this. Okay? Now look at verse 16. This verse is very, very important. I'm going to have to write a few things down. This verse is a verse we actually read on Havdalah. Is the custom. And let's see what it says. Because this summarizes the entire story. Follow carefully. LaYehudim hayeta. To the Jews there was.
What verse is this?
We're on verse 16 now. 15. Mordechai puts on the royal clothing and goes out. The decree is now sent. It's known the Jewish people, the Haman's been killed, right? And the Jewish people are extremely happy about this.
Wait, what? I think we went back to the original source.
So now they see the Haman, the Mordechai, they see that Haman is dead. They see he comes out of the clothing. They knew that a good ending had happened.
Oh.
They knew that a good ending had happened. LaYehudim hayeta Ora. The Jews had light. Simcha, happiness. Sason, joy. And vikar, which means honor.
What's that song?
Joy. Sason was simcha. Simcha is happiness, sason is joy.
And what's the lesson?
And vikar, the V is actually extra M, yakar is honor. Now these four things that they had are actually code words for mitzvot. Ora is Torah. Ora, Torah. They had Torah. Simcha, what's Simcha code for? V'samachta b'chagecha v'yita ach sameach. Simcha is Chagim, the holidays. Yahweh, Chagim. Sason. Sason is a reference to Bris Milah. It's mentioned in verses. The word Sason, joy, is related to Bris Milah. And honor is a reference to Yakar Tiferet, is a reference to Tefillin. To Tefillin. So let's follow carefully. This is very important, and there's a lot written on this. They had Ora, Simcha, Sos, and Vikar. Light, happiness, joy, and honor. These are code words for Torah, Chagim, Bris Milah, and Tefillin. So when it says this, it actually means this. The obvious question is going to be, why didn't it just say this? Why didn't it just say Torah, Chagim, Bris Milah, and Tefillin? Question number one. Question number two, what does it mean they now Torah and Chagim, Jewish holidays, and Bris Milah, circumcision, Tefillin? They always had this, didn't they? So the different opinions to this. One opinion was that actually part of the decree of Haman was that these things were actually forbidden. And many Jews went into hiding after this. And they were in the darkness, not the light, and they couldn't celebrate the Chagim, and they weren't joyful, and they had no honor, because they knew they were about to be killed. That's one interpretation. Another famous interpretation, we're going to look at again in more detail, is actually that now, for the first time, since Har Sinai, they finally got these mitzvot and started to enjoy them a lot more. Get more out of them. Now, Torah for them was light. And the Chagim brought much more simcha. And the Brit Milah was now really joyful. And the Tefillin brought them tremendous honor. The Jews went through a major change at this point of Jewish history. Since Har Sinai to this point, there was always a fear aspect, a fear element that came with their Judaism. After this salvation of the Jewish people, after the killing of Haman, and suddenly things changed. Suddenly the Jewish people went through such a major event. This Purim story is so big and affected us, we weren't the same. It's like, in a negative sense, before the Holocaust and post-Holocaust. It's just not the same. Right? There's before 9/11, there's after 9/11. This is the positive version. There's before Mount Sinai, after. Then there's before the Purim story, and then the Purim story happened, and everything changed. Suddenly, the Torah they had a whole new relevance to them. They were so grateful, because they were all about to be wiped out, that the whole relationship with being Jewish and the mitzvot totally, 100%ly changed for them. That's the way it happened. Medina, b'chol ir va'ir, makom asher divar melech v'daso v'giyas simcha v'sason v'yehudim mishte v'yom tov v'rabim, and they had tremendous enjoyment. Now look at this. This is pretty wild.
Question, sorry.
Yes.
What was the first reason about the mitzvah?
The first reason was they weren't able to perform the mitzvot because they were hiding. They couldn't enjoy the mitzvah. They couldn't do that. So it was practically they were in the dark and they could get out. They could escape. They could escape. Look at verse 17. Sorry, you had a question. I'm sorry, you had a question. You good? Uchol Medina or Medina, in every single province, Uvachol Ir ve'ir, in every city, Makom asher devar melech v'daso megia, simcha v'sasan le'yehudim mishte v'yom tov. It was fantastic for the Jews, and they celebrated as a Yom Tov. V'rabim, now look at this. Even the non-Jews were affected by this. V'rabim me'am me'ha'aretz, many of the non-Jews who saw this story tried to convert. Mityahadim. They tried to convert. They feigned a side conversion. They started to try to, it's going to sound weird, but dress like the Jews and start to act like them, because the Jews were an ascendancy. Whoever's like leading the society, you want to be like them. However, it wasn't real though. The only reason they wanted to convert because they were fearful of the Jews. So they started to look like them, to dress like them, and to be like them. But it wasn't real. The Vilna Gaon says these conversions weren't real conversions. They would just do it because they wanted to be like. According to one opinion, this is the source we get dressed up. One of the sources we get dressed up on Purim. Besides all the clothing we mentioned. Because the non-Jews also wanted to dress up to be like the Jews. This was a very, very high point for the Jewish people. But their conversions weren't real. Okay. Woo! We're flying. Another 10 minutes, can you handle? Let's go. Verse 9. Oh, I feel good. Woo! Yes. And so on the 13th day of the 12th month, that's Adar, which, by the way, Adar has begun. Today is Rosh Chodesh Adar, but Adar Rishon, right? All the events over here happen in a regular Adar. So when you celebrate Purim, you always celebrate it in the second Adar, because that's when the actual miracle happened, being the Adar that occurs 30 days before Pesach. Okay? So we have two Adars, but Purim always falls in the second Adar, one that's next to Passover. Okay? So now the 13th day came. On the very day the enemies of the Jews gained the upper hand. However, the Jews fought back. And look at the word. This is a key word. Highlight this. Underline it. Etch it upon your hearts. V'nahafoch. It all turned around. It all turned around. V'nahafochu. Asher yishlutu Yehudim. Everything was turned upside down. We sing this on Purim. V'nahafoch. Everything twisted. This is the key. The story is everything goes on its head. Everything turns around on its head. They wanted to kill the Jews, and the Jews killed them. So the Jewish people are still under threat, but they're allowed to defend themselves, and the Jewish people are looking very, very good right now. They gathered together in all the places that Achashverosh led, right? A bunch of people, he called them Ish, try to attack the Jewish people. Who are these people? The word Ish connotes leaders. There were 500 leaders who were around in the area who tried to hurt and to kill them.
On this day?
On this day. On this day. It ends up being, look at verse 6, jump if you don't mind. You were skipping? That they weren't able to do it because the fear of Mordechai come upon them. Over Shishana Bira, Hargi Yudim va'aben 500 ish. They killed these 500 ish, these 500 people. Okay. In addition to these 500, by the way, there were thousands more all over the world, all over the other provinces. But in Shushan, there were 500 important people who tried to kill them. Okay. They say actually the Shushan was two parts. There was Shushan the city, and there was Shoshana Bira, which is the center part of the city. Right? It's like New York and then like Manhattan. The Jewish people didn't venture into Shushan general because there were many people that hated them there. So they all gathered together in Shoshana Bira. They tried to attack them over there, and they fought back, and they won. In addition, Haman had 10 sons. These 10 sons were killed as well. Now, if you look on verse 7, at the way it's written, in the copy I gave you, it's not written that way. In the Megillah, is it? Is it separated in your copies?
Yeah.
Oh dear. So in the original Megillah, the names of the sons are written in one long column, a Zoy. You see that? With a gap, then another column. Okay. Now, when the reader reads these 10 sons, he actually reads them in one breath. It's unbelievable. He goes, Ves! That wasn't so good. But he actually does it in one breath. Why? Because they all died at the same time in one breath. To remember that miracle is done. Why is it written in columns? So, because they were all hung from the same tree, one below the other, in a column. Now the Torah, many times, does design, well, not many, but sometimes does designs within the Torah to demonstrate something. For example, right, the crossing of the sea, right, is written with this a certain design. It's the brick design. It's 1, 2 brick on top, then 1, 2 brick, 1, 2 brick, like a brick design. So the Jews would walk through the water of the Yams with the Red Sea. The water was like a wall on one side and a wall on the other. Here, you don't have the security of a wall. They're all there as one line, which means that their line toppled as well. Can you see it? It's a straight line. Straight line down. That means the whole family of Haman fell at this point as well. Literally, they were killed and they fell. And if you look at the end of verse 9,
why they're in columns?
that's why it's in one column. Not as a brick formation like usually in the Torah, it's one column. So it says, Vayasasa, there's a large vav, a long vav over there. There's a long vav, The long vav represents the long tree that all 10 sons of Haman were hung from.
Which one?
Which one?
Vayazasa,
What?
in the Megillah, the vav there is a ravsi. It's a large one. It's a large vav. The last word on verse 9. It says Vayazasa. So in the Megillah, that vav appears very, very, very big. Okay?
It's the tree that they're
To represent the long tree they were all hung from. They all died at the same time, which is why it's in one breath. Aser b'nei Haman ben Hamdasa. Sorry, they were all killed together at the same time. So they all died in one breath. That's why the reader reads them all in one breath, to remember that as well. Now remember, they were allowed to take the spoils of war. Remember that? That was part of the decree. They didn't take a single spoil of war. Why not? This was to be metakein, another battle, if you remember the original Amalek battle, between Shaul and Agag, thank you, Melech Amalek. Because over there, they were told not to take the spoils of war in the time of Shaul. Shmuel said, don't take the spoils. And the people took the spoils of war, right? They took the animals for their own. They said, why are we wasting all this stuff? They were told to kill all the animals. And they didn't. They took it. It says in Sefer Shmuel, they took them all. So over here, to metakein that, although they were allowed to take the spoils of war and all the loot, they didn't take it. Okay? They didn't touch anything. That was Mida getting Mida. The time of Shaul, they were told not to take the spoils, and they did. Here they were told they were allowed to, but they didn't, in order to fix up that mistake of taking the spoils away. Now Esther asks for the 10 sons to remain hanging as a sign to people. Right? By the way, have no mercy on these people. These 10 sons were ready to wipe out as many Jews as they could in revenge for their father.
But they didn't actually do anything.
They tried, but they weren't able to. It was preemptive. Right? You didn't have to wait for it. Now follow this. What happened is the following. This is very important. This is going to have major halakhic ramifications. So I'll say it now and we'll repeat it again later on next class. Just to get it very clear. The Jews in Shushan fought extra hard, okay, and they were able to vanquish their enemies a day later, on the 15th. The other Jews fought for 1 day, 2 days. For 2 days, and they went to vanquish them a day later, 1 day later. The Jews elsewhere, outside of Shushan, were able to fight and to vanquish in 1 day. Maybe it's the amount of people that are coming to attack them. And they won. It's for this reason that the Jews outside of Shushan fought on the 13th, says the Megillah, and got to rest on the 14th, which is when Purim falls. But the Jews in Shushan had to fight an extra day, so they rested. They fought on the 13th and 14th, and they rested on the 15th. So let's make it clear. Jews outside of Shushan fought on the 13th, rested on the 14th. Jews in Shushan fought on the 13th and 14th, rested on the 15th. We have over here something called Shushan Purim. Shushan Purim. The Jews in Shushan celebrated, but a day later. It was thereby decreed that any place that is a walled city or a city like Shushan should celebrate Purim a day later. So all the mitzvot we're going to do in Purim, which we're going to see there are 4 of them, are going to celebrate Purim a day later, like Shushan. Okay? How do they actually verify this decree?
So the rest of the Jews fought only on the 13th, right?
Yeah, we're going to see that inside. So it goes like this. It goes like this. Any city that is a walled city from the time of Yehoshua has the same status as Shushan and celebrates Purim a day later. Why do they say a city from the time of Shushan, from the time of Yehoshua? And the reason is because they didn't want to bring embarrassment to Jerusalem that had been destroyed and had no wall at that time. With me? So they said any city that has a wall around it, but not from now, because that would be embarrassing to Jerusalem. So any city that has a wall around from the time of Yehoshua, from Joshua, when the Jewish people entered into Israel, they should celebrate Purim on the same time as Shushan, which is a day later. The only city that has this, that we know about for sure, is Yerushalayim. So Yerushalayim celebrates Purim a day later. Now, a number of other cities probably had walled cities, had walls around them from the time of Yehoshua. What they do is they read the Megillah on the 14th with a bracha, and then many of them will read the Megillah again on the 15th without a bracha. What are these cities? So it says in one of the Sifrei Minhagim, they are Ashdod, Ashkelon, Beersheva, Beit Sha'an, Gush Kalav, Hebron, Haifa, Tiberia, Jaffa, Lod, Gaza, Akko, Sfad, Ramal, and Shechem. You have to memorize them. It's okay. Just so you know, there's a bunch of cities that, according to the Sfarim, should actually be reading the Megillah on the 14th with a bracha, and then just read it again on the 15th without a bracha, just to make sure, because they could have been cities that are included in this decree. Are you with me? Let's do this again very, very quickly, so we'll finish off with this. What?
We do with Beracha twice.
No. Bracha only the first time.
On the 14th
And then 15th they do without. Everyone else, Yerushalayim, this is the important city, celebrates Purim entirely on the 15th. Okay? That's when it falls. Because that was a walled city for the time of Yehoshua. Just like Shushan was walled, so too. Funny enough, Shushan was not walled at the time of Yehoshua. So in Shushan, for the continuing years, they don't do the 15th, they do the 14th. That's the irony of it. But I'm not too sure what Shushan is nowadays anyway, so we'll leave that aside. Did everyone follow what I said over here? A little complicated? We're going to revisit it. So what was the celebration? Let's have a look at the celebration that they have to do.
I have a question. So it was the time from Yehoshua, because since him, the second day.
Because, no. We go back to the time of Yehoshua, because that's when Yerushalayim had a wall around it. So we say any city that has a wall around it from the time of Yehoshua. What city has that? Yerushalayim. Maybe some others, but definitely Yerushalayim. Why do we say from the time of Yehoshua? Why not from the time of the Purim story? Because at the time of the Purim story, Yerushalayim had no wall around it. Right? Walls had been broken down. It was an embarrassment to Yerushalayim to say that. We don't want to bring disgrace to the holy city of the Jewish people, Jerusalem, and therefore they said any city that has a wall around it, like Shushan, for the time of Yehoshua, celebrate Purim a day later, i.e. Yerushalayim. Okay? Look at verse 17. Let's just do this. We'll do it in English. That was the 30th day of the month of Adar. They gained relief on the 14th, making it a day of feasting and gladness. So all the Jews outside, with chapter 9, verse 17. All the Jews outside of Shushan celebrate on the 14th, because they fought on the 13th. But the Jews that were in Shushan assembled on both the 13th and 14th, and they gained relief on the 15th, making it a day of feasting and gladness. So they have it a day later. Verse 19. That is why Jewish villagers who live in unwalled towns celebrate the 14th day of the month of Adar as an occasion of gladness and feasting, holiday making, and for sending delicacies. Right? The Mishteh, Yom Tov, B'shloch Manot. So they make a meal, read the Megillah we're going to see, and send Mishloch Manot portions to friends. Ish l're'ihu, one to another. So it's the 14th and the 15th were the days they rested, and that's when the holiday begins. And look at verse 22. As the days in which the Jews gained relief from their enemies, and the months which had been transformed for them from one of sorrow to gladness, from mourning to festivity, they observe these days. They say, we're going to see that B'chol Shana Shana, every year, means that this holiday of Purim is never going to go away, says the Gemara, even after Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, some of the other holidays may disappear or change, like Pesach will not be the same Pesach after Mashiach comes. But this holiday we're going to see is messianic, is Mashiach related, and therefore it's always going to be there.
Isn't it the one that the Jews were responsible for? Like Pesach was Hashem Pesach over the houses, but like basically the Jews ended up they had their own.
They were involved here as well. We'll see that they definitely did a lot more for this to last. There was a great level of love over here we're going to see, greater than Har Sinai. We're going to see that. We're going to see that. Okay? And we will visit those two words next class, God willing.